I am an angry person. And TGIF, you're tuned into the Friday edition of The Exchange, and it's Friday the 13th. Don't walk in front of any black cats. Don't break any mirrors. Don't do anything that's going to cause you any trouble today. We're going to talk about superstitions, so stick with us here on The Exchange. Before we do any of that, though, I do want to mention our sponsors, as The Exchange is brought to you by the Ohio Neck and Back Pain Relief Center, Scott M. Gray, D.C., across from the Marion Center between TSC and Kroger. Call 740-386-6580. Night Owl Theater, located on the net at fritzlives.com. For more info, email nightowltv@yahoo.com. Bucyrus Placemats. To put an ad in, call Wayne at 419-562-8473. Located at 116 Wayne Avenue in Bucyrus. Also on the net, bucyrusplacemats.com. And now on this Friday the 13th, we head over to my good pal Charlie Evers for some fascinating facts.
Yeah, one thing, I don't think I'd open an umbrella indoors on Friday the 13th.
It's another one.
Raining or not. But there was something about Marion that maybe people don't readily know. Back in 1917, about 1920, Marion was on the Lincoln Highway. Now, you know, Bucyrus and Mansfield, places like that, but Marion was on the Lincoln Highway for a few years until they straightened it out. Another thing about this area, you used to be able to get a 35-cent foot-long hot dog at the foot-long hot dog stand on the north edge of Marion. And one of the things that helped sell those was their everything sauce, and I've got the recipe.
What
and
is
it's
it?
Very simple. Mustard, ketchup, sugar, and diced onions, all mixed together in a certain ratio, and you can't beat it.
What's
the
the
everything
ratio?
sauce. I'm going to tell you.
You have to tell me, Charlie, how much?
You just have to experiment.
You'll bring it in sometime.
I don't, no, really, you just have to kind of judge it yourself.
By the taste.
Yes.
There you go.
It's
And
really good.
Thank you. And that's a fascinating fact for this Friday the 13th. And if you're going to be staying in tonight, which maybe you will because you might be frightened under the bed, here's a movie from Fritz the Night Owl. It's the Flick Pick. Fritz?
Well, obviously you can't go wrong with any of the Friday the 13th movies. And of course, they're still being shown fairly regularly on cable and the regular TV stations. So I try to pick movies again that that were good in their times, but just aren't that commonly seen these days. The one we've got for you tonight, you'll probably want to have a blanket or be wearing a Snuggie when you watch it. It's called Iceman from 1984, and it deals with a group of scientists who find a Neanderthal guy frozen in a block of ice. And of course they want to treat him as a lab experiment, but the one noble guy there, Tim Hutton, wants to treat him as a human being. Actor by the name of John Lone does a great job of portraying the Neanderthal Iceman brought back to life for the 20th century. Also in the cast is Danny Glover and David Strathern. They've got minor roles. This was before both of them became big stars in their own right, and they do a great job. You can see their potential even in Iceman. The high-tech sequences in this, again, we're talking 1984, but even by today's standards with the great CGI and stuff you see in the movies, Iceman high-tech stuff in 84 was very, very credible, believable, and great to see. Now, you'll probably wonder why these actors, you'll say, wow, what terrific actors they are. Their teeth are actually chattering all the way through. It's not great acting. It's because it was shot up in Manitoba with sub-zero temperatures outside. So the teeth chattering is actually real. The idea of this movie's actually been seen in movies like Tarzan and Quest for Fire, and any movie that's essentially a fish out of water type of plot element. But Iceman brings enough new and unique stuff to it to make it its own movie, well worth seeing. As I say, dress warm when you see it, but I think you'll enjoy spending some time with Iceman.
Hey, that sounds like a great movie to tune in tonight. on Friday the 13th. Joined on the panel this week by Chuck White, who's been sitting in all week. Chuck, have you enjoyed yourself?
Very much so. This has been like old home week for me.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad to have you here. And this Friday, we're joined by a lady who you've seen twice on the show this week, Brianna Goodwin. Brianna, thank you for performing twice
Thank you
and
for
having
having
the panel today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Now, we've got to ask, when did you know you could sing, and what's it like, and what school do you go to?
Well, I go to Indiana Wesleyan University. I'll be a senior in the fall, and I've been singing, since ever I can remember. I took private lessons for 12 or 13 years, and I just really enjoy it. It's a great hobby, and I still sing in college. I'm in a huge choir of about 80 to 90 people, and we travel all over and sing, and it's just great. I love it.
I always wonder this when I talk to somebody who can sing, because I can't. And how in the world do you know what's coming out of your mouth is good? Because obviously what's coming out of my mouth I don't know is not good until I see people's faces.
I think
So
yeah, I mean, just family, what's the word I'm looking for?
encouragement?
Encouragement, yeah, and reviews from peers. And like I said, I took private lessons, so getting instruction from that teacher as well has helped. So.
Well, it's great to have you here. Do you want to mention your age?
I'm 21.
21.
Yep.
Great to have a 21-year-old person here, because yesterday we were talking, we're going to try to run through some subjects here about news. Where do you get your news from?
The internet, mostly. Since I'm a college student, we don't have, well, where I go, we don't have cable. We have to pay for it, so we don't have access to TV news. So it's all internet-based, Facebook, different news stations.
Do you believe what you read on the internet is true?
Not always. I think it depends on what source it's coming from, because Yahoo and who knows what's credible and what's not, so.
Chuck and I were talking yesterday, Marianne was in on this conversation, about is television, radio, and newspaper news still creditable? And here's what I'm talking about. We didn't quite get into it yesterday. Like the birther scandal. That became news on network news, and it was all innuendo. The network news knew it was true. I mean, Katie Couric, Brian Williams, they're the chief editors, Diane Sawyer, they knew darn well it was true, and they certainly are investigative enough to go out and get the birth certificate themselves. I mean, that's just a natural. But they didn't do that. They perpetrated it just like everybody else. They said Donald Trump is doing this, but it made the news. In 24 minutes they get on the 6:30 news. How can a story like that make it, and why don't they report the fact as to say, listen, we know he's an American, we know that the birth certificate exists, we know he never could have ran if the birth certificate didn't exist. That was not reported. We had to wait until Obama came up with it. Why does something like that happen on the news? Do you think that would have made the Huntley, Brinkley, Walter Cronkite, Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw news?
Yes, it was news.
But that is very unfactual news.
It's true, but it was on everybody's mind. Now,
Well, that's true.
they did get the copy, but the state of Hawaii does not allow the original to be
Correct.
taken.
Right.
And President Obama had to, he had to get a waiver. He actually personally asked the governor of Hawaii for a waiver and he sent his own attorney, at his own expense obviously, to get the original one because the state gave them a copy of it. And the birthers did not believe it.
But see, I think that's infotainment, and I think that's cable. Cable news can do that because they've got 24 hours, 7 days a week to fill. Run that story if you want. But for a network newscast, which they say are going by the wayside anyways, for a network newscast in their 24 minutes to make that a story, when they know darn well what the truth is, why?
Mm-hmm.
I think, don't they, though, try to get different perspectives on the story itself? The story was news, because news is the unusual. It's not the usual. And so they have to report based on what they're hearing, what they're aware of, and they have to try to get both sides. And I think most of the stations, except one, networks, I should say, reported as factually as they knew at the time. And I don't think there was any intent by the networks to, except one, to distort the news at all.
Well, I don't think it's a distort. I don't want to say distort. I'm just saying, how does that infotainment make it into a newscast? Because if I was running CBS and I was the editor in charge of the news, just because CNN is running that, or Fox or MSNBC, I have 24 minutes a night. They have 24 hours a day. I know that President Obama could not have become president if he did not present a birth certificate at some point. Somebody did that work.
But Scott, look at what has happened. The president has already come out and said, and he has shown his birth certificate. The birthers still don't believe him.
That's
And-
true.
And so they've given all of the information, but they still, then Donald Trump is now going on to another thing. Okay, he's got bad grades, he says now. Now,
Yes.
how stupid can you get? I mean,
Right.
if it's, Fritz, you were.
Well, I was about to say that the news wasn't actually about the truth of the birth or citizenship or not. The news was about the people who believed.
Exactly.
And it was a
the,
report.
the vast number of people that believed
Right.
this particular report. So it wasn't the actual birth or good grades or not that was at issue. It was the fact that there are a lot of people that are believing this now. So the news was
That was-
about the news.
But I think when you pour gasoline on the fire, you know, people, you're exactly right. It wasn't about is it true or not. Maybe it should have been. Maybe it should have been, of course he's a citizen. Of course this is true. And let's not have 10 more people on saying, oh, excuse me, it's not true. But that's what they do. The Tea Party, mass murderers. I always go through this in my mind. Why do they get so much face time on the news when they kill somebody? You could present that story without ever mentioning that person's name. How often do you mention the victim's name and the victim's family's names as opposed to the murderer? Why do you have to say the person's name? If they're caught and they're in jail and they're being tried, what's the point
It's
of
news,
that?
Scott. It is news.
it
I'm
is.
sorry, but it
Yeah.
is news.
Right. It is.
Charlie, what do you feel about all this?
By the way, rape victims, their names are never mentioned.
No.
And-
Why not?
Because of the,
It's the heinous,
I think murder is
Crime.
heinous. I'd say murder is heinous.
yes, but it's the,
You're
right about that,
Of course,
but-
rape is a horrible
but
thing, and I
it's-
don't think it should be mentioned there either. But why do we draw that line? If my father or mother was murdered, I wouldn't want their name, the murderer's name out there, and they become a Charles Manson.
well, it's in deference, I think, to the person who is still alive.
Yes.
And that woman has to live with
Live
this
with the
for the rest of her life.
fallout.
And why add to her the burden of her pain
Oh,
by
sure.
mentioning her name?
But I say the same thing to the families of the murdered victims. They don't mention the rapist. Do they? Do they mention the rapist?
oh, of course they do.
But you couldn't mention every rape that ever happened. It has to be some horrific rape.
Well, every rape that is
It is-
reported.
it's reported.
If the rapist is caught, the rapist's name is mentioned. The victim's name is not mentioned.
But is that a good thing?
Why not?
Well, I think because depending on the situation of what goes on, you're giving them what they want. I think essentially, I was watching a show on the Martin Luther King assassination last night. This guy, James Earl Ray, thought he was going to be lauded as a great man. He was going to be on television. It was going to be a great thing for what he was doing. It wasn't. But in his mind, in his crazy mind, that's what he thought. And like the Chris Hansen, they shut his show down. And that was a show catching rapists because they said that people were getting wise to it. I just don't think sometimes you should report all the facts. We don't do coffins coming back from war anymore. We did in Vietnam. We don't do it anymore. Who's making that decision? I don't know. Charlie?
No, it's a government decision.
A
Yes.
government.
Yeah.
So the government dictates the news?
In that particular case, they were thinking of the families.
Sure.
And the fact that it was such a downer, such a sad thing that people really didn't need to see every night. coffins being transported.
But you know what another reason was
Yes.
because of the debate whether we should be in this war or not.
Well, that's
And
true.
that was one of the reasons
Yeah.
they did not, the people that wanted us to stay in the war didn't want these bodies to be shown because it would show everybody that the war was a horrible thing.
Well, then there's also the Vietnam vets' terrible treatment coming back. A lot of people thought seeing those coffins were one of the things that turned people against the war, seeing how many people were coming. So once again, the news that you get is dependent upon, you know, like Charlie said, they didn't want to add any more stress to the family. I agree with that. I don't think you should add stress to the family. If the murderer is caught, and you don't have to put his face on a milk jug to find him, and you don't have to do an alert, why are we talking about him? Let's talk about the crime. Let's get the crime down. But why do we need to talk about him and his name? What about all the assassins? Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who shot Lennon, the man John Wilkes Booth. We always remember these people. Who cares about them? They're lowlifes. They've killed horrible people.
Well, but you need to know.
Wonderful people.
You need to know the
There is a-
facts.
yeah,
I
Exactly, there's
just
a need to know it's a news axiom. It's history and it's
It
historical, and
is.
also how do we know how many other people may not have been affected by this particular murderer? I mean, unless we know his name, we see his face, and this has happened to many rape victims. They see the face of the person, then all of a sudden, you get women coming coming forth to let the rest of the women know that they have been abused by this guy themselves. So
Well, it's the W's, where, when, why, who, and so forth. That's what you've got to report on when
Right.
you're a reporter.
As long as you get it right, and somebody's not dictating it to you.
I don't think that's the
Well, no, I don't
case.
think it's the case either.
As I said yesterday, I think the news stations make every effort to try, except one, to try to get the news as accurate as they
yes.
possibly can. I don't really think that anyone is dictating to the news directors, this is what you can and this is how you're going to do it. It's
Well,
Go ahead.
one more word on this. Dan Rather. I think somebody dictated to him that you do not report the news in this way, and the pressure was on CBS. So says he, in such a way that he was let go and said, you can keep a desk, you can sit here, but you certainly are not going to be the anchor anymore, and you certainly are not going to do that. And basically the reason given is you reported something that's not true. But once again, that wasn't true either. What he reported was true. He just couldn't bring the evidence up.
what he reported was what his producers gave him to report.
Right.
So you can't, the anchors are not going to go out and do all of the legwork themselves. That's why we have producers. The producers do the work. So they do everything possible to make you look good on the air, but you've got to have some trust in your producer, for one. You hire a good one, two, you make sure that they're credible. And if they give you a story that is credible, certainly as an anchor, you're going to trust that source, and it's a source that you're trusting.
But my question is,
If it's wrong, okay, it's wrong.
Right.
If the source is wrong, but that's not the anchor's fault.
no, it's not, and I'm with you. But I say Dan Rather was eventually let go from his position and CBS altogether and has somewhat of a sullied reputation, basically because somebody leaned on CBS and said,
Well, that had to do with the military situation, didn't it?
George W. Bush situation,
Oh, okay.
his military service.
Yes,
That's what
that's
I want Dan Rather to be able to report that story, because up to what he thinks is factual, I think's fine. But I do think sometimes companies are run by money, companies are supported by advertisers, and sometimes board of directors make decisions like that. And Dan Rather is one of the best, I don't think anybody's going to deny reporters there ever was, who was essentially fired from his position on the evening news and then fired from CBS because the advertisers lean so heavy on the news department. So do you really get the news when advertisers are important? Could you go out if your advertiser was, how many times have advertisers pulled shows on the network levels in small markets? Phil Donahue Marianne, you talked about him earlier in the week. Phil Donahue did the first abortion on television. You could get away with that now, but advertisers pulled him all over the country. Was it news? I guess it's history now. First abortion ever, but he was pulled.
Well, I remember just as a reporter, Channel 4, many years ago, and I wanted to do a expose on some of the landlords at Ohio State University housing, because some of the places that these college students lived at were traps. They were dirty, and I remember getting a little bit of pressure from the person who was the landlord, but my report stood right, and I didn't have any problems with it, but I did get a little pressure from that landlord, I remember.
And you see this kind of fight between the reporter and the producer and the
News director.
News director every day. I mean,
They
there's some
argue.
arguing, there's some strong arguing about
there are.
the validity of their story and their need to report that story. So, again, I think everyone is doing their very best to report as accurately as possible, except One Nation Network.
You know, yes, and what a discussion this has been for Friday the 13th.
I know.
But it's true, and I think people need to have these discussions because, you know.
But maybe we've talked about it too much.
Well, maybe we have. I hope nobody's left us. Superstitions. Chuck, do you have any superstitions?
Not really.
Not really?
No.
Charlie,
The umbrella.
you won't open an umbrella inside.
No way.
Marianne,
No.
superstitions.
I don't have any superstitions.
Brianna?
No,
None.
I don't.
Boy, this is tough. Fritz?
I'll be consistent, none here.
No superstitions. I don't know. I wouldn't want to break a mirror. If a mirror broke and I broke it, I would kind of feel for a second like maybe it's been piped into your mind long enough that you think, maybe that's a bad thing.
You're supposed to throw salt over your shoulder if,
Something like
Yeah.
that. You're making that sauce Charlie was
Right.
talking about earlier on. We're going to go into the mailbag. I'm planning to marry the man of my dreams this August, although his parents are wonderful. I'm a little concerned that about the role they still play in his life, particularly his mother. She still does my fiance's laundry, cooks his lunches daily, and cleans his house. What do you think, Tiffany and Marianne? Marianne, what do you do?
well, you
Mothers,
don't want a mommy's boy, that's for sure.
you don't want a mommy.
No, I don't think I would.
Okay.
So I would be, but yet, I can understand a mother wanting to do all these things for her son.
Were you that way with your son?
No,
No. So he wasn't a mommy's boy.
no, he wasn't.
Brianna.
We should,
Yes,
should
let's
ask
go
the
to
young
Brianna
girl
on this
because
one.
she would be a
What would
good person
happen?
to answer.
Oh, I personally wouldn't want. I mean, independence needs to come at some point in life. So you can't. I mean, because then when they get married, he might expect her to do all that for him. So
Would she do all that for him?
I don't know. I don't know.
Would you do
her.
all that for
I would not do all that for
There
him.
you go. Fritz?
Well, it depends on how you define the word dependent, but I mean, the point is, I think that if the mother's gonna do the laundry and do his cooking and clean the house, the bride-to-be should say, wow, how terrific, I can go out and do stuff that I wanna do. I don't have to do windows. Mother-in-law will do the windows. So it's, she might be missing out on a good thing here, or criticizing a good thing.
Different
Let
perspective.
Ma do the work.
Hey, there you go. Charlie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think a man is a man, and should be a man, and a man is not supposed to do some of that work that I just heard described.
Oh, boy. I thought I was going to get letters about the news thing. Oh, Lord, Charlie. You just went on somebody's feet there. And we're going to leave that at that. Chuck, follow that one.
How can I follow that?
I think if both people are working, you need to cooperate
Yeah.
with
Doesn't love enter the picture anywhere?
Well, but if.
I mean, if a wife really loves the husband, she'd bend over backwards.
Oh, Charlie.
I
Well, then
think
the husband should bend over backwards and help her.
And marriage is an equal thing, that you
It is.
give and take, and if there's a problem, then they should sit down and discuss it. And I think the problem is that if the wife is very uncomfortable with the husband's mother doing this, then perhaps the wife should talk to the husband should talk to the mother and say, Mom, let's hold off on doing some of these things because it makes my wife uncomfortable, or whatever. Or just, I'm uncomfortable with you doing it. But it's an equal, it's an equal arrangement. Although my wife says that marriage should be we've been married 49 years this coming May. And she says that she still believes that marriage is a contract that should be renewable every year.
That's
There
great.
you go. That's a great
I like
line.
it, I like
If you
it.
have a question for the mailbag, you can join us on Facebook under the name The Exchange Marion, or email them to us at irmcommunication@gmail.com. Brianna, beautiful performing this week. Thank you so much for
Yes.
coming in and sitting in. Chuck, it's been fun to argue with you this week.
It's
I've
been
enjoyed
great.
it.
It's been
It's
wonderful.
been fun for a reunion. And now as we do each and every Friday, it's become our favorite thing to do here on the program. Charlie, you've already offended women today. So now we're gonna come to you because we're gonna give Charlie Evers, now get the camera on Charlie, Charlie Evers' opinions on men who shave their head. Charlie?
Now I think if you're gonna shave your head, why don't you have a tattoo put on it and put the whole mess together in one shot?
How do you think the men with shaved heads look?
Bad. I mean, the human skull is nothing to brag about. I mean, the human skull is, And why men want to shave their heads? All because that guy with the lollipop on TV started it. What was his name?
Kojak.
Kojak.
Kelly Savalas.
Yeah. Does he go around
With the
today with his hair
lollipop.
shaved? No. That was only an act.
I've
Oh.
heard that women like men who have bald heads.
Well, I tell you, if you're a policeman chasing somebody or in a fight, they can't pull your hair.
Yul Brynner.
It all started with Kelly Savalas.
No, Yul
No,
Brynner
Yul
was
Brynner was
Yul
the
Brynner.
Yul
original.
Brynner was first. I think he had
The
a
King and
disease.
I,
The King and I.
Yeah.
the King and I.
But he shaved for the part,
Right.
but he liked it so
He
well,
liked
he
it so
kept
much,
it.
right. I think if you have a nice looking head, I think it's fine. But if like you have all kinds of ripples and stuff,
Well, that's it. How many skulls are smooth and symmetrical and all
Run into
that?
the bathroom and check your head for ripples. We're done. TGIF. See you next week.